I'm Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and I should have been born a boy. At least that's what my father said. I came here today to tell you all of the things that I learned in my lifetime about men and women, and even after. I was born in 1815 in Johnstown, New York. And I used to sit in front of my father's office door. He was a lawyer, and women used to come to him to have him help with all kinds of problems. And then I would say to my father, you have to help those women. You have to help them. They were there with problems such as her husband had taken the kids, and he paid his bar bill by selling them. One was trying to keep her father's currency. Thank you, Margot. Was trying to keep her father's currency and the land that he had given them when he died, gave it to the husband. Because it was a time in America where women weren't allowed any of the rights that men had, none of them. And so they would come, please help me. They wanted to go to school. They wanted to keep their land. They wanted to keep the money that Dad gave me, things like that. And I was sitting outside the door, and I was just devastated for these women. And when they would leave, I would say, Father, we have to help them. We have to help these women to be able to live lives as free as the men are doing. And my father would just look at me and he would say, Elizabeth, you should have been born a boy. He had all of his hopes and dreams in my brother, Eliezer. And my brother went to college. He did very well. He was just a couple of days away from graduation, and he passed away. He was 20. And my father had, like I say, and put all of his hopes and dreams in Eliezer. And so he was devastated. He couldn't even talk. And he certainly wasn't talking to me. I'm just a lowly little girl. He continued like that, and so I said, I have got to find a way to help these women because my father is not going to. I started going to meetings. At the time, they didn't have any large convention-type meetings. What they had was half a dozen, maybe as much as 12, in someone's house, and they would discuss what could be done with that particular thing. This one was how to abolish slavery, otherwise known as abolitionist meetings. And I would go, and we would sit around and talk and try to come up with ways to show the world what we needed. This was at a time in the country where there were so many changes. There were changes of the war, because of the assassination of our president, because of the Industrial Revolution. And women were seeing changes in their lives in particular. They were walking around in these great big skirts with 19 million crinolines under there, and a corset and a waist this big, because wives were the status symbol for the husband. And they just wanted their wives to be flawless examples because it made them look good. They also were experiencing changes because of the Industrial Revolution. It was hitting women just as much as men, if not more, because not only were they dealing with the war, were they dealing with the assassination, but they were dealing with their own issues. These great big skirts were getting in the way. Now, because of the Industrial Revolution, they could go out and get a job. They could work. Not everywhere, but a lot of places. And in going out, they realized they can't be effective in any job. They can't even get there wearing these ridiculous outfits. But when they started going out, they got rid of the bonnet they had been wearing for years, and they put on a hat. And the hat was their symbol of independence. And they would wear little ones, and they would put them in the hat. As the hats got bigger, they needed bigger hat pins. 1832, they came along and they made a machine that would make pins and pins. And like I said, they would have little ones for the little hats, like this one. Hats started getting bigger, hat pins got bigger. And what happened was the women were going to work. They were going to visit friends. They were going without a chaperone. They were going by themselves. They were going with another woman. And men saw this, that they were out and independent. And so the men started hitting on the women. They would put their arms around them on a carriage ride. They would touch them. Oh my God. And the men were doing this because they wanted to, and they could, they were able. But the women didn't like what was happening. And they realized one important aspect of the whole thing. The men are the ones who started this. And the woman realized, I have no defenses. I can't fight off these men. The government saw what was going on and did not realize that this was something that was happening to the women. Instead, they decided, we have to help the men. Look what's happening to them. They're getting hit upon. And then, out of desperation, one of the women started a new thing going. When the man would make advances towards them, they would grab a hat pin out of the hat and jab him one. And he deserved it. However, the government was siding with the men and were saying, we have to help these men. Look what the women are doing to them. And so they made laws all over the country that said, a hat pin cannot be more than 8 inches long. This is 12. If they have a hat pin that's 8 inches long, 9, 10, 11, 12, it was considered a deadly weapon. The women would make sure they didn't have one more than 8 inches long. But after a short while, women stopped wearing hats, had no need for hat pins. And they just moved on. The government still had these laws. Today, they are still there because the men figured, the government figured, what do we have to bother with? They're not using them anymore. And so they just left the laws on the books. So I am sitting with, I have more at home, I would say 4 or 5 deadly weapons. So the role of women, the look of women was starting to change. In 1850, my friend, a very close friend, my friend went to Europe to visit some family. And while she was there, she saw women in the weirdest outfits, but perfect, because it made the women able to move without killing themselves because these great big dresses were hindering them. They would set themselves on fire because the skirt would go right into the fireplace and they would die. They would bring the dust and the vermin from outside in with this ridiculous outfit. So when Amelia Bloomer saw the outfit in Europe, she said, perfect. And she wore it home. When she got to America, she immediately came to me and she showed me this outfit. It was a top, a jacket, and pants underneath the top. And they loved it. Now they could work, they could cook, they could clean, and they could go to jobs, no longer hindered by the long skirts. That went on for a while. Women loved it. But men were appalled that women were walking around in pants. So what happened then, Amelia Bloomer, who was my closest friend, actually owned a newspaper, a magazine type thing that went out to women. And it was called The Lily. And she started to tell people in this magazine about this outfit. She put pictures in there, and the women went crazy. They really wanted to change the image that they had of having to be this flawless person. And so they started wearing them. She would give them patterns, and they would wear these outfits. because of who was advertising it, because of who brought it here and talked about it all the time, they started calling it the bloomer. To this day, we all have seen in our lifetime bloomers. It still exists. And boy, was that wonderful compared to what they were wearing. That was around 1850. At the turn of the century, there was an artist who, his name was Charles Dana Gibson, and he started sketching his wife. But he put her in outfits that were very, very good, I'm just going to say, for women to be able to walk around, to be able to work, to be able to go. And the women loved it. I think they loved anything that would help them function as people. So they wore these outfits. The Charles Dana Gibson outfit was more or less in between the ridiculous skirts and the bloomer. And so women liked it. They could go out in it and they could work again. So in the period between the beginning of the century and the beginning of the next century, they took themselves into a place where they could be independent. I really started going, talking to women and men at the meetings that were abolitionist meetings that people would be going to. They were on one evening in the week. At one of the meetings, which was my cousin, I met a man, Henry Stanton. We fell in love, we got married. And we planned this to happen at the same time that we would have our wedding so that we could go to the convention and we could help in any way we possibly could. And there happened to be a big convention in London right after we got married. We had planned to go there and be a part of the future saving people. And we went over to London for our honeymoon. And we went to the convention all excited at what we were going to learn. And when we got there, they said, "I'm sorry, but women aren't allowed in." And they were humiliated for one, but they didn't let it go. They fought with the men at that time verbally because they had been working on abolition in America. Why can't we come and learn your techniques and it will help further us? They literally threw us out of the meeting. We had to sit behind a curtain and not talk and not be seen. That's a no-no. So that was our introduction to what was going on in the world. Nothing women were allowed to be a part of. We had met a couple there that we became fast friends. We loved them. It was Lucretia Mott and her husband, Jim. And like I say, we became very good friends. And before we left, we said, we are going back to America, and we are going to have some kind of a meeting, some kind of a convention, whatever, so that we could have knowledge passed to the women. And then I got busy at my house. We moved from Boston to Seneca Falls, New York, and that was priority. In 1848, in the middle of the year, a woman named Jane Hunt, she invited me over for tea. Wow, high tea. And I went, and she herself was a Quaker, and she had a few other Quakers. And so at this tea, I was the only one that was not a Quaker. And we talked. And when I am around, of course, we talk about women's rights. So they decided at that tea, while they were drinking the tea, they decided that they were going to do what Lucretia and I had been wanting to do since 1840. And we immediately started to plan. We made flyers to say what we were doing. And we needed something that would tell them what we're doing and how we're doing it. And we made it for 3 weeks from the tea because Lucretia Mott was there. We wanted her to speak, and she would be going home soon. So we decided that 8 days from that point, they would have a convention, and it would be in Seneca Falls. And the first one would be without men, the first meeting, July 19th and 20th of 1848. And they decided that they were going to do something, and that something turned out to be this convention. Considering we only put it in the Seneca Falls Courier, we did okay. We had 300 people there, men and women. The room was full. We were at the Wesleyan Chapel. At the tea, they had planned everything. And of course, I was there. And the entire agenda was planned by me. And all of the grievances and resolutions, I called them, were accompanying the note that I had written to them, a speech that I had written to them that took place after the preamble of the Constitution. And I wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, I didn't write that. I wrote, all men and women. And in this Declaration of Sentiments, my handwriting, it says all of the things that we want. We want to be able to go to college. We want to be able to keep our money, etc. There were 17 of those that were attached to this preamble. And we were ready to present it because we felt that this was going to tell us whether or not we could go forward, or we should go forward. We wanted 100 signatures. And I said, I'm going to write it. And that's what I did. That's what I just quoted to you, the first line of what I changed. I changed the entire preamble and took it back to the women. They loved it. Okay, we're going to present it at our meeting. And they did. At the very last minute, I added something, and I didn't tell anyone I was planning to do this, and I didn't tell anyone until I was about to take it up to get the vote, that the 100 people that we thought would help us. And when I added in the vote, the people who had already signed, the people who were going to sign, all pulled their names away. They didn't want to be involved with anything like that. They felt that women were not ready to vote, not intelligent enough to vote, whatever they thought. They didn't want the women to have the vote. I ignored them, and I presented it to the audience, to the people that came because they cared. And nobody wanted any part of it. And at that moment, a very dear friend of mine who was there, he was the only African American that was there. And he felt confident that he could turn the thinking around. Why? Because he had been a slave. And then he was freed. And then he started talking to people about what expectations they should have for themselves. He understood what it was like for the women. And then, so what he said when he went up there was that we need to give the vote to the women, and here's why. Because they are the ones that teach their children what they should and shouldn't do, what was right and what was wrong. And that was a great, great idea, that they have to be educated in order to be able to do that. And so that was in there as well. This man got the 100 names that we needed. They got 68 men, 68 women, and 32 men to sign this. And we were on our way. We had been working with the states to get all of these things that we needed. We had really, really been working. And this was showing us that our work was paying off and that they really wanted us to continue, and they would even help. And then we had all the votes. We could go forward with the Declaration of Sentiments, it was called. And we were thrilled. It took a lot of time, energy, but we were on our way. We still continued to talk to small groups of women, and maybe 12 in somebody's home. We continued to do that, but with a different emphasis. We wanted the vote. Now we were asking for it. But there was so many other things that they needed to do, not just that. there is a statue that stands in Seneca Falls that shows my friend, Amelia Bloomer, introducing me to a friend of hers, Susan B. Anthony. And we hit it off right away. We really did. We had the same ideals. And we started becoming close friends and working together to get the vote, to get the laws passed that we wanted. And we worked together. What happened was I started having children. I'm married, I wanted children. 7 children I had. And here I was on the trail talking to women, trying to get their vote, talking to legislators. So what they did was continue going to meetings, and I went to Susan and I said to her, I can't travel the way we've been doing because I have 7 children at home and my husband was sickly. I really need to spend more time at home. Susan B. Anthony and me at the 3-legged table writing. I wrote, and she went to the meetings and talked to everybody. I say 3-legged table because the table has gone around to all kinds of people. It is in the Smithsonian, if you're interested. And that's where the 2 of us, can you imagine this little tiny 3-legged table? And they are writing everything there and trying to get the vote. A little while later, I was writing whatever I could to get the women to pay attention and do something and get the vote. And then a little while into everything, Susan and Elizabeth and me wrote this heart. And to me, what it says is very important because it explains what these women did. The left-hand side was written by me. The right-hand side was written by Susan. There were many, many women to help because they took all the energy from me and from Susan, and they went forward. And they worked so diligently to get whatever they needed at the time. And here they were turning it over to the next generation because they died in 1902 and 1906. But they kept on working in memory of these people. The second generation came in, determined to get ahead and to change what was going on. And what happened? They got a new generation in there that would work as hard as we did. One was Carrie Chapman Catt, and one was Alice Paul. And they worked the same as we did. In 1913, again, we were working with small groups up to that point. In 1913, we elected Thomas Woodrow Wilson. We were all very excited because this man that's going to be the president was not a politician. He was an educator. He was president of Princeton, among others. And so we thought, now we can get what we need from the country. What they didn't realize was what Woodrow Wilson was all about. We had already died, and we had set everything up where we worked with the different states, and we got these laws passed by state. But these women, the ones that worked with Carrie Chapman Catt and Alice Paul, they decided that they needed more coverage, that they should be more equal than just state laws. So they moved to Washington, and they started fighting from Washington for national coverage through the laws. President Wilson came to Washington to live in the White House. He got off the train, and there were only a couple of people there. And he was so upset because he was really looking forward to that attention. A whole throng of people there to let him know they loved him and wanted help from him. But there's only a few people here. So he went to the few people that were there and said, "Where are the people?" And they said, "Oh, they're down at Pennsylvania Avenue watching 20,000 women march for the very first time in the country." They marched together, 20,000 women. Well, at this point, Woodrow Wilson wasn't having it. He was absolutely not interested. And already he's starting to feel pushed by the women. So already he doesn't like us, I'm sorry to say. But the women, especially Alice Paul and Carrie Chapman Catt, the women made appointments to come in and see him and visit with him and get his approval on the vote. He ignored us. He absolutely ignored us. So the women decided to take another tack. They marched. Now they made that a regular thing that they had never ever done before, but it seemed to bring the people out. So they did that. They marched. They made appointments to talk with the president. You can do that, you know. And they did. On a pretty much regular basis, they would go in to see the president, and they would bring the issue of the vote, the things that the women wanted, and they would talk. But the talk was not what we were looking for. He says, "I'm sorry, I have no time for the women because they are not top on my agenda." On the top of the agenda was issues like currency, changes of currency. It's time we changed our currency. And tariffs. These are the kind of things that he would throw out at them. And he said, "I don't have time to talk to you about your trivial things. I am doing important work." And this went on forever. Meanwhile, the women are marching there was a group called the Silent Sentinels. And these women put themselves in front and around the White House. And this went on 24/7 for 2.5 years. 2.5 years, and not just a meeting once in a while. They took the opportunity to do something to get in the good graces of Woodrow Wilson. But he wasn't having it. He was so disappointed that he didn't have women and men at the gates of the White House. And they had signs, and I have a copy of one. Mr. President, how long must the women wait to get liberty? And this is what, of course it's small, but this is what it looked like. Mr. President, how long must the women wait to get the vote? These they put, and they also had one that said, Mr. President, what are you, underlined, going to do for the women? He was ignoring them. And he did this, they did this for 2.5 years, picketing the White House. Finally, they had it. They had worked so long. They had had it. President Wilson also had had it. He said, get them out of here. Now, the women had chained themselves to the White House gate. And they weren't going to move. They wanted help now. The women that were outside for 2.5 years decided that they had to do something too, and it had to be quick. So they chained themselves to this fence, and Woodrow Wilson saw this and said, do something, get them out of here, I don't want to see them. So the secret sentinels, as they called themselves, were chained to the fences and angry, very angry, that they had to come to this place in life because of Woodrow Wilson. But he was the boss, and he said to them, get them out of here. And so they did. They went to the gates, they unchained the women, and they dragged them into court. Literally dragged them into court. After the women were there, they saw a judge who said, "60 days in the workhouse." And they took them, dragged them in with this sentence of 60 days, and they beat them and beat them, hanged them by their hands so that they couldn't sit, and so they couldn't sleep because they were standing or hanging in their cell. And the worst part of it was the women had decided to do a hunger strike. And all of them worked at that. Well, the president and now the police went to them and force-fed them. Now, force feeding, if you don't know, is a tube. It goes up your nose, down your throat, to your stomach, and they would put raw eggs in it. And they kept feeding it to them until they felt that the women were not going to die from it. And that shows what they went through. Ridiculous. Well, we had a president in the White House who said, ooh, this doesn't look good. It's making me look really bad. So I think we better change our vote. And he put down that he was in favor of the women having the vote. And it went to Congress for a vote in 1919. And they went against it. And then more came in and they went for it. So here we were, it's going on the ballot. And it went on the ballot. And it was very, very close. And then it became tied for and against. And the women kept it there. And they were having an election. It was a tied vote. And they had one man was a congressman, Harry Byrne. He was from Tennessee, and he was one of the major people at the time to say, I don't want this. I don't think the women are ready to vote. And as I said, it was a tie. When he got to his office, there was a note there. It's from his mother, Feb. And it said, he was 24 years old and he was a legislator there. And yet, Mommy sent him a note. And it said, be a good boy. Be a good boy and help the women get the vote. Please, be a good boy. 24 years old and he's a congressman. And she says, be a good boy. But he listened to his mother and he voted for the vote. He broke the tie and the women won the vote. And the entire world thought that Woodrow Wilson was wonderful because he gave the women the vote. They don't have anything to say about the fact that 2 women died while they were doing this. One was by force feeding. The second one was when they threw her into her cell and she hit her head on a metal bar. We've already lost 2 people. The crowd at that point goes to Woodrow Wilson and says, we're losing people. And they were very, very aware of what was going on. And they showed to the cronies of Wilson that they weren't going to tolerate this. And then it became outrageous, as best to say. And the newspapers were printing this and sending it all over the world. And they blamed the president at that time. At that time. To this day, and I've tried it, I've talked to people and I've said, what did Woodrow Wilson do? And they tell me, oh, he got the vote for women. Nothing was said about the terror that he used to make that happen. They know in this day and age that Woodrow Wilson gave the women the vote. That had been on November 14th, 1917. And with that, the women had the vote, they had what they wanted. It was happy and sad, because it took 72 years for that to happen. A year after the women got the vote, a woman named Natalie Johnson took a 26-ton piece of marble and she carved, as you see in the top half of the women only, which is why it's called the ladies in the tub. She chiseled out first Lucretia Mott, second Susan B. Anthony, third one, that's me. And there's a fourth piece there, if you notice. It's blank. And it's been said that it was blank so that when the first president was elected and a woman, somebody would carve that on the fourth piece. You know it's still blank. And then the Congress put it in the basement. And it stayed there until 1997. It was given to them in 1921. But we finally got it upstairs. It's in the rotunda, right smack in the middle. But they, I guess, got recognition at that point. We were moving, we were still doing a lot, but we didn't have the excitement, energy, whatever, to work the same way to get the vote, to get the people to look at all the rules and tell them what they wanted. And you know, first I just have to tell you that when they were voting in 1919, they were really, really excited about what they were doing, no matter which side they were on. Everybody was just thrilled with it. So one of the things they did to let the world know that they were involved was they wore a red rose or a yellow rose. The red rose said, I am not going to vote for a woman to have the right to vote, to be the president, to do anything. I'm not going to go there. And they carried all of that through for a lot of years. And these people, no matter what rose they had written, had all of the votes and they could move on. It was a lot of work, 72 years, and they had worked diligently for this. So they pressed on because there were a lot of women who needed the laws. A lot had happened from the time they were wearing these ridiculous skirts to the day that they had the vote. But there is still so much more to do. I'm really sorry that I did not have the opportunity. I could have done better. I could have helped. I could have made it happen. But I didn't. I did what I could. I guess my father was right. I should have been born a boy. Thank you.